All right, so the first time I did this question, I did not really understand what was going on. I got it right, but oh boy, this is a tough one. So I'm going to say off the bat, if you struggle with this, don't worry about it so much. This is a fine one to be having some trouble with. And look at how long those answer choices are. It's also one that if you're worried about finishing on time, you can take a look and be like, all right, it's from a 100-year-old novel and it's got long answer choices. I might just skip this and save it for last. That's smart. That's part of a good sacrifice plan there. But let's take a look. We need to, what does the text most strongly suggest about the story of Hans Castorp? So this whole thing is about Hans Castorp, so let's take a look. The story of Hans Castorp that we intend to tell here, not for his sake, for the reader will come to know him as a perfectly ordinary if engaging young man, so he's ordinary, but for the sake of the story itself, which seems to us to be very much worth telling. So the story is worth telling, the guy is ordinary. Although in Hans Castorp's favor, it should be noted that it is his story and that not every story happens to everybody. Is a story that took place long ago and is, so to speak, covered with the patina of history and must necessarily be told with verbs whose tense is that of the deepest past. So patina is kind of like the like a covering almost of history. It's kind of like history is involved in it. It's involved. Not a word you really need to know to get this, but there you go. So honestly, I would not come away with this from this thing with any sort of dumb summary. I barely understood what I read. Notice how the sentences themselves are constantly like interrupting themselves. There's parentheses, there's dashes, there's commas, there's all sorts of things that make it hard to even follow. Don't read it again. Just let's go to the choices and see if there's anything in there that maybe is more understandable. So A, though it is true that stories of even the most uninteresting people are themselves interesting because all people are unique, the reason the story is interesting is nonetheless difficult to understand because of the passage of time. There's a lot of stuff I like in here that's good, right? I like the word uninteresting because that matches nicely with the word ordinary. So maybe that's a good fit. But then it says all people are unique. Well, I don't know about that. That's a pretty big claim, right? The word all is one of those words that always scares me because it starts to quantify things. We're talking about Hans Castorp. Do they say that all people are unique? Well, he's an ordinary man. It's a story worth telling. It's his story. They're not saying that all people are unique. That's a very big claim. And then it's difficult to understand because of the passage of time. Well, that's kind of maybe getting into this part here. And it's saying that it's going to talk about it in the past tense, but I don't know that that says it's difficult to understand. So that part also scares me. But honestly, more than anything else, the word all here is enough for me to be like, if I have to guess, I'm not going to guess this choice. This is where those trap answer categories really help us because there's a lot of stuff that's good in A, but that one word all is enough to scare me. Let's look at B. Even though it is a story of a person of no particular importance, so check, he's an ordinary person, its age and the manner in which it therefore must be told, are both indicators that the story itself is important. This sounds pretty good. The word must scares me, kind of in the same way that all scares me. But they do talk about the age of the story. It's in the past. The manner in which it therefore must be told. I don't know what manner it's to be told in. And the story itself is important. They did say the story, I guess, is kind of important. It is a story worth telling. So I'd leave this in. I don't know, but let's take a look and see. Like all stories about the lives of inconsequential people, there's that word again, all, this story must necessarily be related in a particular way if the reason the story is consequential is to be made evident to the audience. Well, again, I barely understand what's going on here, but words like all and necessarily are really strong. They're limiting us in very important ways that we have to make sure the passage is also saying, and I don't remember them doing that. This is about this one guy. So all stories about the lives of inconsequential people must necessarily be related in a particular way. We get this one guy's story, it happened in the past, and they're going to have to use past tense words. I don't think this is about everyone. I'm even more sure that A is wrong now, but C is even worse. So this is something I get rid of. And this is where we talk a lot, or I talk a lot, about placing a smart bet. If I've got no idea what's going on, I'm not going to place my bet on choices A or C because they have words that really scare me and tend to be wrong. They might still be right, but if I got to place a bet, I'm going to bet against those words. Let's look at D. It is a remarkable story that happened to an unremarkable man. Yeah, they said he was ordinary. They said it was a story worth telling, so those things are true. Unremarkable person. Though one could plausibly argue that because the story is valuable, some of its value accrues to the person at its center. That means kind of like attaches to, right? So because the story is valuable, it attaches to the person we're talking about. And they do kind of say that, right? Although here, I'm going to use a different color. Although in Hans Castorp's favor, it should be noted that it is his story and not every story happens to everybody. So the story is worth telling, and that is why we are telling it, for the sake of the story itself. And we're not telling it for the guy, because he's just an ordinary dude. But it should be noted, as they're saying, it's his story. So maybe because it happened to him, there is something unordinary or interesting about this person, right? It's his story. So maybe. It's basically, is that the part, is that provable? Or is this other part here provable? That the manner in which it therefore must be told, are indicators that the story is important. So is the story important because we have to tell it a certain way? That's choice B. Or is Hans important because this story happened to him? Right? So which thing are we saying? That the story is important because of some sort of kind of backdoor way of kind of giving importance to something? Or is it more that Hans is important? And it really does talk more about Hans being important or not important, ordinary or maybe kind of a little bit special. So I don't necessarily fully understand it, but I picked D here because it's got more things in its favor. I don't like A. I don't like C. B, that word must is really, it's another example of a word where I'm kind of going against picking it because it's just not likely to be a good word. It's so strong. It's so limiting. Now, does D have anything like that? Plausibly is a nicer word, right? It means possible. So it's a little bit weaker. It's a little bit more, gives us more wiggle room, more flexibility. So the choice is maybe weakened in that way, but weakened is good because then it's not like the word must where it kind of limits us to things. So I like that. Some of its value, I don't know. It's got some words that also just attract me because of their weakness. And that's playing the game. So this would be a case for sure that I'd be marking for review and saying if by some miracle I have some time left over at the end of the section, I'd love to come back and look at this one more time. But I would have been picking D maybe with about 75% confidence that I'm right. And, D is the answer. But it's a hard question. So you're going to have to be comfortable with not fully proving everything the best way. But the trap answer categories, those kinds of scary, strong words that we're familiar with from other questions, those are really helpful in cases like this. It might nudge you in the right direction when you're really confused about what's going on.